Buenas tardes desde Quito, Ecuador, sede de la
Good
organización.
afternoon from Quito, Ecuador.
Bienvenidos todos. Para términos logísticos,
Be
contamos con
welcome.
interpretación
So now just to let you know that we have interpretation into 3 languages, English, Spanish, and Portuguese. To have access to these options, you should click on the globe at the bottom of your screen.
Ahí podrán seleccionar el lenguaje
There you will be able to select the language
en nombre
of
de
your
la
preference.
Panamericana de Energía,
On behalf of the of
Banco
OLADE
Interamericano
and
de
the
Desarrollo,
Inter-American Development Bank, we would like to welcome you all.
sexta edición de la Semana de la
This is the
Energía.
6th edition of the
Agradecemos
Energy Week.
a nuestros patrocinadores
We would like to
en
thank
especial
our
a
main
la Semana
sponsors,
de Energía, a nuestros socios estratégicos.
also our strategic partners and media partners.
En este momento, continuamos con el panel 2.
Right now, we're going to continue with Roundtable 2 about sustainable energy development.
Acceso.
Today, we will be listening to Roundtable 3, Universal Access to Modern Energies, and Roundtable 4 about energy efficiency in decarbonization. Now, let's start with Roundtable 3. Moderator for this session will be Javier Cuervo.
Que active su micrófono y
Please,
cámara.
Javier, turn on your camera and mic.
Perfecto, muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, Karina. Good afternoon to you all. My name is Javier Cuervo. I work at the Inter-American Development Bank on the Energy Division within the Infrastructure Department, and I the lead for the Energy System Access within that division. I really am very enthusiastic about this roundtable, this panel, because this topic is very important to all countries, the region, and especially the population that wants to have this universal access to electricity and to clean sources of energy. That is one of the sustainable goals. That is goal number 7. It is true that in Latin America, we have made significant progress. Our coverage goes above 97%, and that coverage is the result of the work in the last decades. But we still have a 3% of the population that is not covered, does not have electricity, and that is important to take that into account. We have little more than 70 million people that cannot access clean options of energy. So we're going to be talking about access to electricity. I think it's important to deal with this topic, taking into account what happens at global level. I think it's very positive that this is taking place after the COP26 in Glasgow, talking about a fair energy transition in which the population can have access to clean sources of energy. And we're going to be talking about this in this panel. Also, there was a lot discussed about access to energy during the General Assembly at the UN and the document issued by the UN in order to achieve the objectives and the results set in the SDGs. I think this is the right time to continue making progress in the region, but we do have to face some challenges, and these challenges are those represented by that 3%. Also, there are significant differences between coverage in rural areas and in the cities, rural population that has no access to this energy. Also, it is important to look after urban communities because there is a process of population moving into the cities. Of course, that we cannot ignore the rural areas. This situation is also very different within the region. We have examples such as for example, Haiti, that is an exception to the rule, and then some other countries that have a large coverage, both in rural and urban areas. Then when they have coverage in those areas, that small percentage in the population represents a large number of individuals. And we also have countries in which there's a lot to be done in this topic of rural areas coverage. Today in this panel, we're going to be talking about those issues and also the role played by all the associations and bodies that we are representing here, so that we can continue making progress to guarantee that universal access to the whole area. This session, we're going to have a short presentation by Andrés González. Andrés González works at the MIT and Pontificia Universidad de Comillas, and he will tell us about a specific tool for the planning to universal access. The idea that when we are carrying electricity to those who don't have it, we can have a network, a grid, or to generate systems in isolated areas. So in this assessment of these possibilities, it is important to have a tool for a georeference tool. After that presentation, we're going to have the panel where we're going to have 5 different panelists from different organizations. So he's the co-founder of a company that's called Waya, that basically promotes the use of these tools of georeference. We have the opportunity at the IDB to work with this tool in different countries. A recent example could be Ecuador. Andres has a master's degree, also an MBA, and also international cooperation courses. He's also an industrial engineer. So now I will ask Andres to share his screen, and then we're going to move to the panel. So please, Andres, you have the floor, and no more than 8 minutes. Thank you. I'm sharing screen right now. So first of all, I would like to thank you all for having me. Thanks for the invitation and for this opportunity to address such a large audience. This first image that you see here, I have several slides, but I will rush through them, mainly sharing images. This too represents the dimension of the challenges that we face. As Javier was saying, he described some of the figures for the continents, that even though we do have a 3% of the population that has no access to energy, to electric energy, we can see here how there are huge spans of territory that do not have electricity. Countries such as Colombia, that have 2 or 3% of the population pending access, have huge parts of their territory without any access. Okay, I'm a researcher at the MIT and the Universidad Pontificia Comillas from Madrid. And after 14 years of working with universal access and development of tools, we created a company in order to accelerate the pace of services providing to different governments and NGOs in order to contribute to develop integrated master plans. What do we mean by this? Basically, if we think about providing electricity service to 40,000 clients in, for instance, Uganda, we developed this 4 years ago. One of the ways of doing that basically is trying to take the grid to all these clients, and that is the traditional way of doing things. Basically, it provides very good results, and that is what is being implemented in Latin America, and that's why we do have those very high rates of electricity. But these integrated plans have different technologies. So the grid only reaches those clients that is more efficient to give energy. We can see the network here, the grid that is in black, that covers, as you can see, most of the territory, and all the points that you can see around it, that those are populations that still have no access. So basically we have two ways. One is to have everyone connected to the grid. We have high tension and mid tension. You can see that in red. But in an integrated plan, we have an extension of the grid because that is cheaper. And then to some other populations that do not have high demand or are far away from the network, those are the green ones. Those are provided energy through mini grids. They are far away from the main grid. They may represent villages with um, only 5, 7 kilowatts of consumption, or because they are very small in size. So it's not worth to implement transformers, for instance, in these cases. Most companies are not doing that, but we can have decentralized generation. And apart from those networks, we also have individual system solar kits. And those solar kits are those points in purple. Those are households that are so far away from the grid or from other houses that it's not worth taking the grid to them. So basically what we do with this integrated plan, we calculate for every town and village, for every group of clients that compose a system, which is the cost of the grid extension, which is the cost of extending the grid, is that blue line that you can see, and it's increasing as you move away from the grid, and also the cost of electricity, and that is the line in red that you can see at the bottom. So the cost of creating grids individually or with a grid is the other line in black that crosses the screen. So we realize for those communities that do not have access to the grid yet, where the grid is the cheapest, that is on the left side of the graph, we can have solutions that are 40% cheaper than the same equivalent outside the grid. But as you can see on the right, we can see some areas in which the grid is 20% more expensive than outside the grid. And our system is not assessing anymore the alternative for the grid extension when the cost of extending the grid is 5 times more expensive than the equivalent off grid. So if you can do this calculating the size of generation cost of the grid. So it's very detailed, and we can have very important information both for planning and for calculate the cost of the service of each one of those solutions.
We do this in a rather complex way that I will not explain right now because I only have 8 minutes. But we have a geo-reference processing, a geospatial restriction. We do the pre-processing first. We try to find out where the customers' lines and the restrictions are. We try to find out where protected or high-risk areas are located. We try to find natural reservoirs, risk areas, as I mentioned. And then we go into the power system modeling so that we can develop as many systems as necessary. And then we can create also business models in order to get funding for a project portfolio. And all of this, of course, translates into a map. This is the map of Rwanda that has over 4 million new users. You can see in blue and in red grid extensions. Then we have microgrids and isolated or standalone systems. I'm sorry that I'm going too quickly. If you have any questions, I will be open to them later on, but I'm rushing right now because I don't have that much time. But I think that the most important thing is that we need to provide a connection for our clients within households, but also within schools, healthcare centers. And of course, the service needs to meet the demand. It's not the same to electrify a telecommunications tower or a rural household because they all need a different peak demand of kilowatts. We need to identify where those places are, and to identify that demand, we have been using machine learning and AI. This, for example, is a case of Papua Barat in Indonesia, and we are showing over here the topography of the region, and we are trying to include those topographic features so that the design of the grid will be as similar to reality as possible. We are also using a significant input of data, and once all of that data has been collected and stored in a geodatabase, the model can very quickly create new scenarios. It can tell us what would happen if the price for energy would increase within the system, what would happen if the price of batteries were to be maintained or it were to go down. And what we want is to answer those questions in a very detailed and efficient way. And once again, here to the left, you can see how all of those projects with their own cost of service and cost components are then at the service of the creation of a demand system or dispatch system. And then once again, this all translates into business plans and into the capacity of developing plans. This, for example, is a 40-year plan developed for universal access in Rwanda. We know that in Rwanda, 35% of the population had access by 2020, and we want to cover 100% of the population. Now, in first stage in 2025, we want to reach 100% of the population, but with very limited access and with very simple equipment. Once we have established this, we would move into a second stage where we could increase the number of clients, especially for those clients that are connected to the grid, rather than clients that are connected through standalone systems. Now, another important thing to bear in mind is that none of this works if we do not have a distribution model that is integrated and makes it possible to have feasible, sustainable funding in the long term, not just for the extension of grids, but also for the extension of mini grids and for standalone systems as well. So that this solution needs to take into account the fact that a village that is electrified using a mini grid might become electrified by a full grid. So we do not want to disincentivize, of course, investment, but we know that in some parts of the country we have standalone systems or small grids, and we want to improve that quality of service. So first of all, we need to integrate all different solutions. Of course, we need to have a feasible, viable distribution model. We need to have subsidies for rural electrification as well. And of course, many times we do not know of these subsidies, and it is hard for countries to access them because depending on the country and the part of the country where we are, the subsidy might be different in terms of the needs of that place. And then, of course, we need to focus on the development. We need to focus on socioeconomic health and education development as well. And as Isabel Beltran will be explaining, She has been developing this with us, so I will not go in depth here. So here, as you can see in the picture, this is an example of a grid extension. This is a case where the existing grid did not reach the neighborhood. Sometimes it happens that the red goes through an area, but it does not necessarily reach all users. Perhaps we're missing information over here, but in this case, the electrical company can then check the grid and see who is still missing a connection. Here we have other examples of micro grids. We have some users over there in violet that are not connected yet. Perhaps we are unaware of the fact that they are connected to the grid. That's something to check as well. And these are examples of standalone grids. And please do remember, because many times we talk about energy plans, energy policies. I myself am an engineer and I love technology, but we cannot lose sight of the fact that behind those people who do not have electricity, there is a world of needs and desires that we should try to satisfy. And having said that, I go back to you, Javier. Thank you, Andres. Thank you for your presentation. That was a very interesting tool. And we all need to remember that it's a tool that needs to be contextualized within the creation of programs and policies and regulations and incentives that allow for funding. But I do think you covered some of the topics that are useful for this panel. As I mentioned in the beginning, I really like this panel because we have participation now of Engineer Gabriel Velázquez, who is the Technical Director of Energy Mining Planning from the Ministry of Energy and Mines in Guatemala. And he is in charge of energy planning and public policies of the sector. He's also acting as the Director General for Energy before the SICA, and he supervises tenders, the implementation of energy efficiency and renewable energy actions for the control of energy statistics. For the ministry, he is a mechanical and electrical engineer from the University of San Carlos, and he also holds a master's degree. Let me continue then with the profiles of the other members of the panel before we move into the questions. We also have Dana Risankova.
She's an energy specialist at the World Bank. She's the global lead for energy access. So basically means that she works providing strategic and operational guidance to the World Bank's energy and extractive global practice to scale up the energy access interventions. She has an amazing experience working with Africa, with Latin America, with the Caribbean, and with the Energy Sector Management Assistance Program at the World Bank. So she's going to bring us the perspective of another multilateral organization, but that has experience working worldwide. Then our next panelist is going to be Mr. Martin Luke-Mayer. He's an expert of sustainable energy from the UNURI, the United Nations Organization for Industrial Development, in which he's been actively working with sustainable energy program in the less developed countries and the small island states. He's also coordinating the expansion of the network, the global network for regional centers for sustainable energy. And that's one of the reasons why we wanted to have his expertise in this panel, so to bring that regional point of view of working with several centers. Después tenemos a Isabel Beltrán.
We now have Isabel Beltrán. I'm sorry, my camera was off. I'm so sorry about that. But what matters most is what I was saying. We now have Isabel Beltrán. She works with the Rockefeller Foundation, and she is the director for the Power and Climate Initiative. She has over 15 years of experience in international development. She has worked with the World Bank and the Development Economics Research Group and the Bank's Development Impact Evaluation Initiative. And she has also worked in the Inter-American Development Bank. And she currently leads the work of the Rockefeller's Foundation for the LAC region with regards to the energy initiatives, especially the ones that have to do with the powering of the last mile. So this is the point of view of a philanthropic entity of global outreach. And then the last member of the panel is Amanda Soler. Amanda works for the Alliance for Rural Electrification, and she will be sharing the point of view of an organization that brings together a significant amount of companies from the private sector. Amanda is a project and communications officer for the Alliance, where she leads the development of knowledge products, of stakeholder engagement products, and multiple advocacy campaigns. She holds a bachelor's degree in business management, and she has a master's degree in climate change and environmental policy from the University of Leeds. The bachelor's degree comes from the University of Valencia, and the master's degree comes from the University of Leeds. So as you can see over here, we have a wide variety of experts coming from international organizations. Some represent the private sector, some represent philanthropic organizations as well. And I think that this is something quite similar to what we saw in the Glasgow COP26. So my first question is for Engineer Velasquez. So Gabriel, could you tell us a bit about, within the context of Guatemala as one of the examples of countries that has quite a lot to show with regards to the powering of the last mile, what do you think are the challenges that you face, and what kind of support the multilateral organizations, international organizations provide? And going back to Guatemala, what is your point of view in terms of what the region needs to do to achieve universal coverage? Thank you, Javier, for your question. I think there are many challenges ahead, of course. I think the most important obstacle that we are facing is the budget. I speak obviously for Guatemala, but we know that these implementations are costly and it is hard to get funding for them. So for me, the most important thing is getting funding. Also, we know that projects for the transmission of electrical power are very costly and it's hard to implement them. We also run into other difficulties that go hand in hand with this. They have to do with social aspects. Yesterday, as a matter of fact, I was talking to the minister and the vice minister of energy, and we were talking about social conflicts, especially within the spaces that are the most far away from our cities in the country. We have a lot of people who oppose the deployment of transmission grids. And that is because Guatemala has been growing and it is rather hard to organize substations. Those substations are surrounded by homes, so people do not want to have them close to their households, and that becomes problematic. We also have environmental and archaeological reservoirs in Guatemala, and we should respect those spaces, and that's another obstacle for us. And we also need to achieve interagency coordinations and cooperation, and we need to do this in the best way possible in order for these projects to be successfully implemented.
I believe there's a section in Guatemala that was planned since 2013, and we were not able to finish that. There are many stakeholders that are against that project. They have different point of view, and this goes hand in hand with disinformation. I think that education is crucial in all these aspects so that we can face this challenge. That is part of the points that we have to discuss. Regarding your second question about some kind of support that we may have, I think that it has to do with funding, right? As I told you at the beginning of the presentation, I believe that there is now a loan of $120 million by the IDB that has been approved by the financing committee of the ministry. It only needs to be approved by Parliament, and we are going to provide energy to 67,000 households. And also, we need not reimbursable funds, because when we started planning and defining policies, it was difficult to find the right formula because there are many places that are far away. Some of them, some others are closer. That depends on the location of the households. So there are several financial mechanisms, and we don't have a specific formula to address all these issues so that we can reach our goals and be able to provide electric energy to most of the country. Thank you, Gabriel. Thank you for your overview of the situation in Guatemala. And yes, we have worked a lot with Guatemala, and we hope to continue doing so.
I think that the remarks by Gabriel kind of like lead very clear into what was going to be my first question to you, because it's precisely the issue of financing. You know, like you have a very vast experience in how to bring financing, working with several organizations to increase access. So maybe you can tell us about the main challenges that you see having happening regarding access, and maybe also if you can enrich that remark of that discussion of, you know, like you work with several other parts of the world, and in many parts of the world the access rate is much lower than the access rate that we have in Latin America, but those regions eventually will be at the 97%. I mean, we hope, that's what we all aspire, that everybody at least will be at the 97% before reaching the 100. So you have like a very interesting discussion there of what will be the lessons that you think are important from the process in Latin America, from the rest of the world, but also because that the rest of the world had that such as a pressing need, maybe they can also have some lessons for us in reaching that last mile. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Javier. Disculpas que no voy a hablar en español porque ya.
I'm sorry, I'm going to speak in English because my Spanish is a little bit rusty, you know. I worked in the region, but a long time ago.
Switch to English. I think these are very good questions, and maybe just to bring a little bit of the global perspective, right? So reaching universal access in Latin America is a challenge, but I think we should be aware that the region is doing actually comparatively well compared to other regions, right? We have about 97, 98%, depending what data set you use, of electrification rate. And we have about 88% of access to clean cooking. And even though this is lower than 98%, comparatively, this is higher than many other regions, including both East, Southeast Asia, South Asia, and obviously more than Africa. So, and there are countries in the region that are actually an example to others because they have achieved universal access to both electricity and clean cooking, like Chile and Argentina, or near universal access at least. So I think when we look into what I think we need to understand what the challenges are, right? And what does it take to reach universal access? And I think what I see in Latin America, the problem is that while it has reached these high levels of access, the pace of progress has slowed down in the recent years, because that last mile is really, really hard to Question whether the region will achieve happen in Haiti. And here it's not the issue of remoteness, but it's the issue that it's complex issue of poverty, fragility, institutional weaknesses, security that are constraining access expansion there. And so looking at what the solutions are and how this relates what we see in other parts of the world, I think it is clear that for both cases, both these remote pockets as well as for Haiti, it is really the distributed renewable energy technologies that will play the largest role. But that means that the approach to deploy these technologies is different than what's the sort of traditional grid extension approach. And interestingly enough, right, this is the area where it may seem counterintuitive to say that we can learn things from Africa, because obviously Africa has more challenges, it's less electrified than Latin America, but because it has such a large number of off-grid population, lots of efforts in the recent years have been focused on how to electrify this off-grid population. There have been lots of private sector innovations, companies that basically came with the new business models. And I think some of these can be applied now to Latin America. But you know, it doesn't mean that you just sort of take what works in one place and bring it to another. Some adaptations of the model will be needed. So I think what is really needed is to see how this applies. So obviously the numbers of unelectrified households is much lower in the region. So it is unlikely that you can just say, oh, we will just bring in these private companies here and they will come and they will electrify everyone. I think what will be needed in Latin America, and what I think there is a great potential to do, is to establish public-private partnerships, models where public sector comes in. Public sector will need to come in with financing. It's not an impossible task. We have, you know, in the whole region, it's about 10 million people who are not electrified, compared to the large number of people that is electrified. So I think part of the solutions that one needs to look into is how can we leverage the fact that there are so many people that are electrified and already have access. Is there potential to leverage cross subsidies in between those that are electrified and benefit those that are not? And then also, though, at the same time, look into bring in private sector, because private sector can come with innovations, can come with the know-how of how to basically work in these sort of remote and poor communities. The competition can benefit actually prices to go down, and bring this sort of benefits of the public and private sector working together. So, and that's important both in the communities that are remote, as well as I have mentioned in Haiti for other reasons, because it is the utility has so many issues that it's not being able to expand. You have even urban areas that are not electrified. But again, if there can be donors such as the World Bank and IDB, we are working together in Haiti, and we are bringing resources to work with the government to help electrify through mini grids, for example. So bringing resources that fill in the viability gap, and then the private sector can come and invest as well. And just final note on this one is that also when you do that, whether it's those very remote areas or areas like Haiti, two important things. One is to not to focus just on the electrification of households, but especially to also look into development of productive uses, basically coming with more holistic solutions to make sure that the communities can really develop, so that these electrification solutions deliver impacts and are more sustainable, as well as electrification of healthcare and schools. And we're doing some innovations in these areas also with another person on the panel, Isabel, in Haiti as well. So it's exciting that we are bringing this all together here. So I will stop here and maybe can bring in some more examples later.
Thank you, Dana. Thank you. Thank you for your remarks. I mean, they were very rich in content, and actually you are giving me a very good opening for the questions I'm going to be posing to the next two panelists, because you mentioned several things that are related to the work that they do. So first I will address Martin. Martin, precisely as Dana was mentioning, like there's the issue of the deployment of technology, like the challenge that you have when you have the new technologies, how to deploy them, the issue of public-private partnerships. So I wanted to ask you to give us, like what do you see, or how do you see is precisely the role of the network of organizations such as the energy centers that you are supporting in terms of helping with the deployment of these technologies and bringing these innovations, like how do you see that, like the process can be accelerated when you're talking about the deployment of the technologies, and if you can complement that with certain focus on, like what have you seen are like the best strategies to reach a last mile population, like the idea of helping to resolve this issue of accessing those communities that we saw in the maps that Andres showed us are harder to reach. Thank you. Floor is yours, Martin.
Yeah, thank you very much, Javier. And thank you for the previous speakers, also emphasizing the experiences from other regions. I think that is very valuable because, as it was mentioned before, some of the other regions, they work already since quite a long time on these decentralized models for mini-grids or standalone systems, and also on market development programs with that regard, which always have a supply and a demand side, let's say a consumer side, and then also a supplier side, where we are at the local entrepreneurs, which must be able to maintain these systems, but also participate in manufacturing and assembling and also servicing of those systems. And also here comes the importance of innovation in. I would like to briefly tap on the importance of regional cooperation in that regard, because it is the main field I'm working in, let's to say. Just to say a few words about the global network of regional sustainable energy centers, which we are coordinating in close cooperation with the regional economic communities, such as the Economic Community of West African States. It was one of the first centers which we established in West Africa, has huge challenges with regards to electrification by grid, but also by off-grid systems, mini-grids in the rural areas. And basically, we replicated this model also in other regional, in cooperation with other regional economic communities like the East African Community and the Southern African Community. And finally, we got a lot of demand also from other regional organizations, as in Asia, but also in Central America and also in the Caribbean. So we supported the previous years the establishment of the Caribbean Center for Renewable Energy and Energy Efficiency and the SICA Center for Renewable Energy and Energy Efficiency, where I have to say that we are not the owners of those centers. So from the very beginning, those centers should be owned by the respective regional organizations. So they become part of the usual economic integration efforts of the region. And here also we see the important role of these regional centers, and that is establishing a market for products and services with regard to renewable energy and energy efficiency, which is on the one hand grid-connected technology, but then is on the other hand a broad range of other products and services like energy efficiency also, or mini grids or standalone systems. So through these regional centers, we try to create a technical capacity to implement the higher policy objectives of these regional organizations. Very often, there are nice policy statements, but at the end, then afterwards, there's no technical capacity to implement those regional policy targets, like we see also in the SICA, for example. And based on these regional centers helping the regional organizations then to really create the technical synergies, create economies of scale between the countries, and also stimulate spillover effects between the countries, and for sure also stimulate joint learning and cooperation between the countries. And here, particularly, I could tell you some examples from some of the regions. Like, for example, the centers in Africa all these regional centers have a strong focus on promoting decentralized systems. They all have mini grid programs, promotion programs, and to develop the market. I think it was also mentioned by Dana before, there are all kinds of issues and barriers for this market, and they are usually on the supply and on the demand side of that market side, let's say. And so it's about knowledge barriers, it's about qualification barriers, it's about also qualification and certification of products and services. Here we are at the quality standards for the systems, and I think this is also a very nice area where regional cooperation really makes sense to set standards for efficient equipment for productive uses, for example. So when we see in Africa, but I'm sure that also here in the Latin American region to some extent is an issue that you have then renewable energy powered off-grid equipment, but in the end, this equipment is not very efficient because there's no joint standard also, for example. So this yeah. Mm-hmm.
Please, final remarks.
Final remarks. Yes. Also, I wanted to tap a bit about on this what Andre was presenting. I think this is really a very useful tool, this planning tool. I would emphasize in this context also because it was not mentioned before, with the climate change, no impact on the Latin American and Caribbean region, where particularly the Caribbean countries are impacted, and the Central American countries are impacted, because this poses a threat to universal access, because we see the hit of hurricanes on Dominica. They destroy the entire infrastructure. So I want to emphasize also the importance of developing this resource integrated.
Martin,
resource
sorry, Martin, sorry to interrupt you. Okay, 20 more seconds. Okay, you're good.
Thank you. Fine.
Yeah, thank you. I think that the point that you brought is also very important. Yes, all this needs to be, I mean, the concept of resilience has to be now be embedded in any new project that we're doing in Access. You know, like either we have standalone systems, mini grids, grid extension, resilience to climate change is clearly a must. You mentioned a concept which actually serves me now as an opening to our next panelist, Amanda Soler, which is market developments. And precisely, ARE and IDB worked recently in a publication that just came out to be, that was published, that was announced last week. It's precisely about that, you know, like the status of the off-grid market. So I will ask Amanda, maybe obviously not to mention the whole publication, but maybe to bring us 2 or 3 highlight messages from that study, from that analysis that you did about the status of the off-grid market for Latin America and the Caribbean. And among that, and also doing that, what did you see were like the most successful strategies to achieve success in the electrification of the last mile? Thank you, Amanda. You can speak in English and Spanish. Sorry, I should have addressed you in Spanish. I kept the English in my mind. I apologize, but please proceed in Spanish if you feel more like it.
Ningún problema, Javier.
No problem, Javier. As a matter of fact, I am used to talking in English. So if I speak in Spanish or in English, I'm so sorry. Good afternoon, esteemed attendees and panelists. In my case, good night because I'm in Brussels. I apologize for my voice. I am rather voiceless, but I did not want to miss out on the opportunity of participating in this panel. I think it's going to be hard to not be repetitive. I think the perspectives mentioned were very important. You mentioned the context for the region, the access ratios, but perhaps I would like to go a bit more in depth into the potential of off-grid renewable energy markets, both in mini-grids as well as in standalone systems, to cover that last mile that has technical, socioeconomic, and geographic characteristics that are very specific. And I would say that the efficiency, adaptability, and innovation of these technologies make it so that they can be adapted for any region and for any local circumstance. And as such, they can provide electricity to pretty much any part of the world. Of course, that at the technical level, we have other important aspects such as economic feasibility and social feasibility, as my colleagues have mentioned. But this information that everyone knows, thanks to the fantastic work that the panelists over here have been doing, and of our partner, the IDB, and also of the work of OLADE, as well as thanks to the work from the Eastern Caribbean states, where we conducted an event last September where we emphasized the role of the off-grid renewable energy to emphasize the reliability of the system and the access to essential services in case of strong climate climate change events, as the previous speaker was mentioning. We also see that off-grid energy provides great opportunities for the electrification of productive uses of electricity, as Ms. Pixanova was also mentioning, particularly in rural areas. We know that we have about 52 million people in that region that carry out rural activities for income generation, mainly in the agricultural sector. So off-grid energies might present a new opportunity to open up these communities to wider economic sectors that are related to their work, such as to tourism or to other uses of energy in other points of the value chain of agriculture, such as the sales of food, such as seed processing, and so on. So at the same time, I think that this creates a window of opportunity for international investors and for private companies. For example, out of our 185 members who work in this sector and who know and have experience in good business model and good funding practices from other regions. I am so sorry, Amanda, can you please wrap this up? 30 seconds? Yes, I'm so sorry, Javier. I wanted basically to ask them how we can guarantee an access to energy, especially going to the socioeconomic development and to the contribution to the climate change goals as well, while we support the development of these communities. I think that that's the main message of this particular paper. Of course, it is so hard to talk about all the recommendations that we have, but if you are interested, please take a time to read this analysis to get more information. Thank you, Javier. Thank you, Amanda. You mentioned several things that I want to ask Isabel about, because what many of the panelists mentioned is at the core of one of the most important announcements of the COP26, with the creation of a global alliance for energy by Rockefeller Foundation, together with other philanthropic and global organizations. So what this initiative is putting people at the forefront of your initiative. So I wanted to ask you, Isabel, what might this alliance mean for access to energy in the LAC region? And together with that, how do you believe these kinds of initiatives might be able to leverage opportunities for funding? Good afternoon, everyone. The Rockefeller Foundation has been working with renewable energy in other regions. We are new in the LAC region, and we just came in working with the IDB, but we are coming together with other philanthropic organizations such as the Bezos Fund and the IKEA Foundation to create this global alliance that is fully devoted to supporting energy transitions and last mile solutions at the global level. I think the most important thing about the announcement for the creation of this global alliance is that we are including and adding our support and aggregating our support in only one organization, and we're bringing together philanthropic funds that might provide that funding that Gabriel was talking about, because we want to fund the kind of work that Andres, for example, is doing with regards to the use of new technologies and new planning models at the global level. I think the most interesting thing for Latin America is, as you mentioned, and as Dana mentioned as well, is that we have this challenge of this last 3%. We hope that all regions across the world will be able to reach that last mile. And for that, we want to teach and help Latin America learn more about how to create private and public alliances and gain funding. And especially, I think we want to add just another layer of thinking, not just about access and connectivity, but also, as Amanda mentioned, we want to add to these access projects programs for the increase of demand in the use of household appliances, both for household consumption and for productive uses as well. We also want to have these projects focus on the growth of local markets as well. And another important thing that we can help with in the region is to create innovative mechanisms for funding for resilience, especially in the Caribbean and in Central American countries, because there are many countries that have access, but the quality of that access is rather low. So we also want to provide a way to have funding for these critical access. We know that this region has opportunities ahead to include new technologies and new energy mechanisms and new ways of changing the energy mix. So I think the alliance offers a good possibility in order to provide support for a region that normally does not get philanthropic support. And we also want to bring to the region possible models that, with changes, might help us create new solutions for structure and project development problems. I know that we are rushing. I'm so sorry about that.
Great, Isabel. Thank you so much. And I would like to thank the panel. We are right on time. Okay, just to wrap up, I would like to tell you that the publication is available on the website of their organization, the Alliance for Rural Electrification, that's already available. I would like to thank all our panelists. I think it's been a very fruitful exchange. We all agree that there's a need to continue working, especially on funding issues. It's good to know that we have new stakeholders, and we hope their contributions are significant. We have identified important challenges, especially the participation of involvements and engagement of communities to make these projects more feasible. All those challenges related to the implementation of the new technologies. Andres, thank you very much for your presentation about the tool. Let's hope that we can use it. And I would like to close this session. I would like to thank Olade for the organization of this panel so that we can exchange, so we could exchange about the main progress made. I would like to thank the audience. And if you have any questions, we will answer them. And there's a link that I think Amanda has already shared for the publication. So I close then this panel. Now, Karina, you have the floor.
David. Agradecemos a nuestros panelistas.
We would like to thank all our panelists for being with us today in the roundtable 3 about universal access to modern energies. Now, after this introductory video, we're going to start with roundtable 4 about the role of energy efficiency in the decarbonization in the region. Please stay connected.
Bienvenidos a todos. Damos paso.
Thank you and welcome to our roundtable 4 about the role of energy efficiency in the decarbonization of the region. The moderator for this will be José Antonio Urteaga. So please, Antonio, turn on your mic and camera so we start with the session. Thank you very much, Karina. Good afternoon to you all. Thanks for your interest in this issue. In this panel, we're going to have 2 parts. In the first one, we're going to be talking about the Observatory of Energy for Latin America. And in the second one, a roundtable, we're going to be dealing with the role of energy efficiency in the decarbonization of our region. As we all know, energy efficiency is one of the actions that has the highest impact on climate change. Energy efficiency has been approached from all the topics in the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. It's part of the 17 goals, and it focuses on goal 17 so that we can have modern, affordable energy. This initiative of sustainable energy for all was launched by the UN and has 3 goals. One is to double the access and energy efficiency by 2030. The savings in energy has allowed us to decouple from economic growth when it comes to energy consumption, and then the reduction of its values. Actions implemented at global level produce that the actions in between 20 and 2017 is 12% lower than planned. This means that the emission of greenhouse gases was of 33 tons of CO2. That is lower of the figures that we had reached without energy efficiency. However, it is important to highlight that there is a potential that is much larger than that. Just for you to have a reference, between 2000 and 2017, the global rate of reduction of energy was 12% at world level, but in Latin America was the region that recorded the lowest reduction in this intensity, with only 0.9%. And this confirms the potential that we still have in the region. Apart from the environmental benefits, energy efficiency is a fundamental element to achieve security in energy supply, to improve competitivity of the countries, as well as job creations, especially in this recovery stage after the COVID pandemic. It's a key strategy to accelerate improvements in energy efficiency, and that is part of the topic discussed in this roundtable about the management of energy under ISO 50001. As part of these projects, energy efficiency plays a fundamental role for the decarbonization of Latin America. Now, we are going to start with our panel, and I'm going to introduce the Observatory of Management Systems in Latin America. That is part of the effort coordinated with OLADE. I would like to tell you that today we have the formal launch of this platform that is in the Energy Hub of the ITB, where you can have access to. I would like to thank OLADE for the coordinated work. I would like to thank Alfonso Blanco, Pablo Garcés, Roberto Aiello from the Inter-American Development Bank, that is one of the generators of the idea, and especially to Leonardo Beltrán and Andrea Haynes, that are part responsible for this platform. We're going to start with a video with a presentation by the Executive Director of OLADE, Alfonso Blanco. And before that, I would like to introduce you to two consultants that made all this possible. There's a presentation by Ms. Haynes that has more than 20 years of experience in the energy sector, both in private consulting and public sectors. From 2015 to 2018, she was Under Secretary of the Energy Saving and Efficiency in the Ministry of Energy in Argentina. And in this point, she was focal point in the National Cabinet of Climate Change, Vice President of the Climate Change, Vice Chair of the G20 2018 Energy Transition Group, and co-chair of the G20 and 2018 Energy Transitions Group, and co-chair of the Executive Committee of EPEC. She currently serves as an independent consultant on energy efficiency, and sustainable development for the Inter-American Development Bank and Avina Foundation. She is a president of the Argentine Committee of the World Energy Council, president of the Argentine Committee of the World Energy Council, president of the Energy Efficiency Commission of the Argentine Institute of Oil and Gas, and an expert and a member of the selection committee of the Energy Management Leadership Awards. She teaches in different postgraduate programs related to her areas of expertise. Also, as I was telling you, one of the persons responsible for this is Leonardo Beltrán. He is a member of the Board of Directors of Sustainable Energy for All, of Fundación Mexico, and the World Economic Forum's partnering to accelerate sustainable energy innovation. He's currently a non-resident fellow at the Institute of the Americas, executive fellow at the School of Public Policy, University of Calgary, member of the University of Calgary, a member of the editorial board of the Latin American Energy Organization, ENERLAC. Leonardo was also the Undersecretary of Planning and Energy Transition between 2012 and 2018. Also, he had different positions in Mexico as Director General for Information, the Director of International Negotiations. He's got a master's degrees in Public Administration and Development from Harvard, a degree from the Instituto Autónomo de México. So we're going to start with this first part of our panel. with a presentation by the Executive Secretary, Alfonso Blanco, and then we're going to move on to different presentations of this observatory by Andrea and Leonardo. Let's watch the video now.
Hola, muy buenas tardes. En el 2020
Hello, good afternoon. In 2020, we formalized the collaboration between OLADE and ITB to create a platform for exchange of information about the best practices and lessons learned with the implementation of energy system implementation in Latin America and the Caribbean, apart from identifying possibilities and investment funds to promote these kind of activities. The project was developed in 3 stages. First, we had a survey of the different energy management system, their results, and the experiences of best practices. Secondly, we created a roadmap to propose alternatives and proposals to multiply the scope of these programs. Thirdly, we developed a regional observatory of energy management systems. As a result of this project, now we have an observatory that will be presented in this session. The industrial sector in Latin America and the Caribbean represents approximately 30% of the final consumption of energy and 16% of the emission of greenhouse gases. The potential of reduction through the implementation of management system of energy is approximately 10 and 40%. This reduction in consumption translates in savings without changing the quality of the service. We also know that energy efficiency is one of the pillars to reinforce the decarbonization processes in our countries, and this will be the topic that we'll be discussing in this session. The observatory wants to contribute to the promotion of the adoption of these measures related to energy efficiency in the sectors with the highest consumption, especially the industry. That's why we would like to present it here. Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias.
Okay, thank you very much. And now I would ask you to please turn on your cameras, Leonardo and Andrea, so that you can present the observatory. Thank you very much, Andrea and Leonardo. Thank you, my dear friends. So now we'll present all the progress made for Latin America and the Caribbean about energy efficiency. We will listen to Andrea Haynes, that is a consultant for the Parsec project. I think there was a confusion, but now what we are going to be presenting is we're going to be launching the observatory for the energy management systems for Latin America. Please, Andrea, you have the floor. Okay, thank you very much, Jose Antonio. I think the confusion is because I'm also part of the next panel. That's why. Okay, good afternoon to you all. I would like to thank OLADE and the Inter-American Development Bank for having me, and also to have the opportunity to present this work and being part also of the development of this observatory that, as Alfonso mentioned, the objective here is to promote the implementation of energy management systems throughout the region in Latin America and the Caribbean. So it's been a pleasure to work with Leonardo Beltran that is here with me today. Thank you very much, Andrea. I also would like to thank OLADE and the ITB. First, I would like to thank the Inter-American Development Bank and OLADE for the vision and their work. And personally, I would like to thank Jose Antonio, part of the IGB, Roberto Ayelov, Alfonso Blanco, and Pablo Garcés, that were fundamental in this process to organize all these projects
it would have been impossible to reach all of the stakeholders. And for me, it is an honor and a privilege to be participating together with Andrea in this incredible work group. We are tackling one of the biggest opportunities possible and present for us with regards to the mitigation and adaptation of climate change. In the past few weeks, in the COP26 for climate change, we heard about the multiple challenges that we face in order to mitigate climate change, the challenges that we face to access funding, and together the efforts that are being now presented by the IDB and the OLADE are bringing in those elements and combining them into a scheme that recognizes potentials and tells us how we can make the best of those potentials. The International Energy Agency, as a matter of fact, identified that 1/3 of the mitigation opportunities to reach the decarbonization path for 2050 or to reach climate neutrality is energy efficiency. And here is where Jose Antonio was saying that it is possible for us to achieve this without sacrificing any elements within the chain of production. That is why it is so relevant to focus on energy management systems. Now, another central element is funding. And one of the things that we have been able to observe is that the international community has entered into a commitment to use all the way up to $130 billion to open up opportunities for neutrality for carbon. Now, thanks to the opportunities that we have found, we have seen that there is a potential to use $23 million a year that can be used without the need to access other financial resources. So with our actions, we would be able to reach that hidden fuel as classified by the International Energy Agency. Through energy efficiency, we could liberate these resources and use them in other activities. And the other core element that we need to consider is the job opportunities that are opened up by this. And now, in light of the COVID-19 pandemic, we are undergoing a crucial moment where we need to try to compensate for the losses caused by the pandemic. Surveys from the World Bank do show that the region suffered 7.2% income hit per inhabitant. So investing in such an energy management system and using that $23 million investment, we would be providing jobs for over 230,000 people that might be joining the workforce, thus increasing the income per capita. So it does make sense to look into this system because it increases the number of the workforce. It makes sense at the financial level, it makes sense at the energy level, and it also makes sense at the climate level. And it is because of this that it's an honor and a true privilege to have become a part of these efforts. Having said that, I yield the floor to Andrea. Thank you, Leonardo. Together with what you were saying, and with the reasons for the work that we have been doing, I want to share with the audience the results of so many months of hard work. But before that, I do want to highlight that beyond the team that was directly involved in the creation of the observatory with the support of the IDB and TARDE, we worked together with countries from across the region. Right from the beginning, when we started creating this observatory, as Alfonso Blanco mentioned in his video, we surveyed where we stood in the region with regards to the implementation of energy management systems. Thanks to that, we were able to reach so many countries in the region through workshops and seminars where we tried to discuss and identify good experiences and good lessons learned. We discussed the things that we would do differently, what problems we faced, and what programs were working. We got feedback from experts across the region. We also implemented a survey, and based on that, we were able to get input for the observatory beyond the data that was available in the multiple official websites of the agencies of each country. But I think that it's better if we start showing you this observatory. I can share my screen with you. Do note that you can access the observatory going into the Energy Hub, and that's hubenergia.org. You can find all the information there for the Observatory of Energy Management Systems for Latin America and the Caribbean, and all the information and all the updates that we start working on will appear there in the Initiatives tab. So hopefully after this presentation, you will all go into the website and try to find more about it. Let me tell you more about this observatory. As Alfonso Blanco was mentioning, the objective is to create a space to share information about this subject, to share experiences that we have had across the region. We have great reference points and benchmarks for public policies, for successful companies that have achieved excellent results by the implementation of energy management systems. And all of that information is here. It is condensed within the platform of the observatory. And hopefully, this platform will be useful in order for you to go forward in your growth in this area. What you will be able to see at the beginning is a presentation. And then if you move forward and you scroll down, you will see the map for the region. And Leonardo, I would like for you to explain a bit about what we can see here. Yes, the idea of the observatory is actually for you to be able to learn about the experiences across the region. First of all, by understanding the institutional deployment in all the different jurisdictions of the region. And as much as we are able to understand those models, depending on the size of the country, depending on whether it's a northern country or a southern country, we will be able to understand the facilitating conditions that will help us make the best use of energy management systems. And what Andrea is showing you over here actually selects a couple of countries. Yes, we have Brazil and Chile, but you can actually select any country that you want to see the results for those countries. Yes, that is correct. So imagine you come from Colombia and you want to know what is the potential for the final energy consumption. And you can select your country, and then you can compare the energy consumption in your country with the energy consumption in other countries. You can choose whichever country in the region you want. You can also make a sub-regional choice as well. Or you can actually hit the tab for all the countries. And by choosing one thing or the other, you can get a general idea of this potential. And I think that what we want to do mainly is, on the one hand, to provide information about the potential for the use of energy in each country, divided by the different services and sectors in the country. And based on that information, we can then start making a decision with regards to why it makes sense to focus on one or other activity. Even if you are an administrator, a student, a teacher, a researcher, an entrepreneur, or a plant operator, you will be able to find in this hub information that will guide you into the implementation of energy management systems. Now, if we continue scrolling down, for example, if we're interested in knowing about budgets for energy management systems in one country or the other, you can select countries. Here we have Chile, Colombia, and Mexico. And we created this matrix over here that includes the type of budget. And then we also have the mandate for those institutions. So in terms of budget, we could have a country that has a fully public budget, that is a budget that fully depends on the public sector, as is the case for Colombia and Mexico. Or what might happen, as is the case of Chile, that the institution gets its budget from the private sector. And if we're talking about the mandate, then the mandate is a bit more specific, such as Chile, Colombia, and Mexico. Or you can even find information about other countries that you are interested in. And depending on the country, you will find more general mandates, such as the case of Argentina or Barbados. So this allows you to see this analysis matrix that explain different models and help you see what happens once you are trying to implement energy management systems. And as you can see over here in the graph, you will be able to see the countries that you chose. And you can choose as many countries as you want, or you can simply select one. As you continue scrolling down in the website, you will find other tools, such as success stories. And depending again on the country that you selected, you will be able to see many success stories for those examples in financial and energy terms, but also in the impact of greenhouse gas emissions. Yes, and over here you actually see a list of those success stories, and then you not only have information about the country, but you also have information about the organization, the activity. And I think it's worth mentioning that this is very complete. Now, if we were to include all the countries from the previous list, we would also get all those success stories for the entirety of the LAC region. So you would get all those cases for each country. One thing worth noting is that this is at its early stages. Hopefully we'll get more cases, but over here, these cases in the list came from the Energy Management Leadership Award Initiatives, which is an initiative from the Clean Energy Ministerial, which I'm sure many of you know of. You know that every single year there's a call for these awards, and one of the biggest attributes of this initiative is that the experiences of each and every one of these cases and of each and every one of these organizations are then left at everyone's disposal so that anyone can learn from their good practices and their experiences if people want to understand what was done, how it was done, and what were the results. For example, if we go into the National Oil Company of Chile, you get a summary over here of what the company did. You can see that for each of the cases. And then later on, we will also be able to see that you can actually download all of this information. And as I was saying, these are the first cases that we uploaded in the website. Hopefully, we will continue nurturing this database with more results and more experiences from all the countries in the region.
Then we have more information from the observatory. We have different promotion programs throughout the region. And this took place in the last years. For instance, the promotion programs for the implementation of the energy management system. And here, if we scroll down, we can see all these projects, those that we could identify. Of course, that with the contribution of the different focal points in the countries. Also, it would be interesting if you have some information that is not included here, please send it to OLADE or ITB so that we can add it to the website. Here in this part with the promotion programs, you can sort them by country, name, body in charge, benefits, beneficiaries, also the duration of the program. And then there's an hyperlink to the website where you can get more information about that specific program. This is included in every one of the projects. So if you click on the hyperlink, then you can find more information about it. So the objective here is to consolidate as much information as possible that is related to the implementation of these energy management systems. Then we have another option that is success stories, and these are sorted by country, organization, certification year, and different parameters that you can follow. And again, you have a hyperlink in case you want to have more information about it. You can click on the hyperlink and it will take you to the document that has been uploaded. There you have all the detailed information that may be useful to you. The advantage of this, and we can sort them, all the projects by year, country, depending on the improvement of the energy performance, and that information can be downloaded in Excel file, and this is very useful. I mean, personally, I wanted to identify the implementations of a specific country or the whole region for that matter, and I had to create that X file on my own, but now that is available to us all. Now we can do it and sort by the different parameters depending on the investment energy savings. So there we can download all the information available. Okay, just we are running a little bit behind. Maybe you can present the assessment so that then all users can navigate on the website. Okay, just one thing before that. All this reference material that was made possible to CONUE, that is the leading organization when it comes to publications. You have all the reference materials where we identify all the different countries in the region. Lastly, last but not least, we have this section here where you can have a self-diagnosis about your situation when it comes to the requirement of standard 50001. You can answer questions just by answering yes, no, partially, and you can navigate through those questions. I have it here so I can show you the result once the report is ready. I had it somewhere.
Sí, la verdad es una herramienta muy práctica porque permite evaluarse.
This is a very useful tool because after answering all these questions, we can find out about the status of our organization, and then we can get a report on the progress made by the energy management system by our organization, basically answering questions, yes or no questions. And after that, it shows some information and a report that you can download to see in which parts we should work more. I think now I'm sharing that on the screen. So after you answer all the questions, you get a report like this one for each category. You have a short description, and from 1 to 100, we find out the status of our organization. You can download this as a PDF file, and then we get a global score. This is a first approximation, but at least it's useful to know how we are performing when it comes to manage energy management systems based on ISO standard 50001. And then that score has its specific explanation where it explains the situation and in which areas we need to focus and work a little bit more. This is our first diagnosis. Please feel free to use it, and let's hope it is useful to analyze the situation of your organization when it comes to the requirement of the standards. This is available, and you can download the report right there. This was just an overview. Please feel free to visit the observatory, and let's hope it is useful to you all. And then if you have any contributions, comments, or ideas on how to improve it, those are welcome. This is a first step, and let's hope we can improve it with the experience of the different countries in the region and all the organizations involved to improve these energy management systems. Thank you very much, Andrea and Leonardo. So as you can see, this is a very useful tool that I'm sure it will contribute to accelerate the implementation of this system that basically increases energy efficiency. My colleague Juan Herrera here, that also helped to make this possible, has already uploaded the link in the chat so you can access the observatory. So now the panelists for the next session of this panel, please turn on your cameras and mics. First, I would like to thank to have Jennifer Lake, Director of the Global Energy Program of the World Resource Institute. Thank you very much, Jennifer, for being here. She leads a team of more than 40 energy specialists worldwide, focused on implementing energy efficiency, renewable energy, and energy access solutions. She co-founded the Building Efficient Accelerator, BEA. This was a public-private collaboration of more than 35 partners supporting 30 cities, implementing energy efficiency policies and projects in support of the Sustainable Energy of All initiative. She led WRI's work on U.S. cap and trade design. She was a World Bank consultant. She got a scholarship of the Thomas J. Watson Foundation for a year of research in Malaysia, Singapore, and Taiwan. She holds a BA in Asian Studies, Political Studies from Pitzer College in Claremont, California, and was a student of Nanjing University, China. We have with us also, we have Roberto Borja. He's an official of the Climate Change Unit for United Nations, the Regional Office for Latin America and the Caribbean. He coordinates United for Efficiency initiative, and basically which aims to support countries in transforming their markets to a more efficient products and equipment. He also worked for UNPD in the Dominican Republic as a national program. She was the national program coordinator, coordinating the rural electrification program jointly funded by the European Union and the UNDP. Prior to UNDP, Roberto worked in the private sector in the telecommunications and renewable energy industries in several countries in Europe and Africa. He's an engineer from the Universidad Politécnica de Madrid, Spain, and a master's degree of the Queensland University Technology in Australia. Thank you, Roberto, for being here. And also in this international panel, we also have Victor Hugo Ventura. He is the head of the Energy and Natural Resources at the Sub-Regional Resources Agency in Mexico. He's a mechanical and electrical engineer from the Universidad de San Carlos in Guatemala, specializing in electrical systems, specializing also in electrical power systems. And he holds a master's degree in economics of the Universidad de Anahuac. He has more than 30 years of experience in the energy sector. Since 1992, he has collaborated with the CLAC, where he has led studies and initiatives for the countries of Mesoamerica, as well as evaluations that include the areas of renewable sources, energy efficiency, rural and electrification, diversification of the energy mix, energy regulation, and markets. In Guatemala, his native country, he was the manager of planning and projects at the INDE. He was also industrial sales manager and industrial sales at Empresa Eléctrica de Guatemala. He also was a professor at the University of San Carlos. We also have with us Odón de Buen Rodriguez. He's the General Director of the National Commission for the Efficient Use of Energy. Thank you very much, Odón, for being here. He's a mechanical and electrical engineer from the National Autonomous University of Mexico. He holds a master's degree on energy and resources from the University of Berkeley. He has also worked for UNAM at the Federal Electricity Commission and the Lawrence Laboratory at Berkeley. In 1995 to 2003, he was Director General of the National Commission for Energy Savings in Mexico. From 2003 until the end of 2012, he was a consultant for national and international organizations at national and international level. So I would like to thank him also for being here. Also with us today, we have Gabriel Prudencio, Head of Sustainable Energy Division at the Ministry of Energy of Chile. Thank you very much, Gabriel. He's a civil engineer from the Catholic University and holds a master's degree in public administration from Columbia University. Between 2014 and 2017, he was operations manager of Valhalla, a company that develops pumped hydro pump power plants and photovoltaic plants in northern Chile. During 2012 and 2013, he worked in New York at UGE, participating in the development of wind and solar energy projects at distributed generation scale. Previously, he was part of the Ministry of Housing and Urbanism as a member of the Reconstruction Committee for the 2010 earthquake reconstruction, and was also at the Techo, was also with the general management of that foundation. Also with us today, we have Omar Freddy Prias. He's the professor at the University of Colombia and director of the Colombian Knowledge Network in Colombia for energy efficiency. Welcome, Omar. Omar is an electrical engineer, specialist in technology management, and he holds a master's degree with doctoral option in energy efficiency. He is knowledgeable on energy planning, design of policies, regulatory frameworks, and programs in energy efficiency and renewable sources. He's an international consultant for the IDB, UNDP, IFC, and project manager of national and sectorial projects in energy efficiency. Currently, he's a consultant for the Colombian industry and the energy sector, and he also teaches at the National University of Colombia. And as I told you, he also heads the Mexican Center for Solar Energy Innovation.
As you can see, we have an amazing panel that has a global and national vision that will enable us to understand and move forward towards the decarbonization through energy efficiency in the LAC region. I would like to start with Jennifer today and ask you, Jennifer, that the Energy Efficiency Accelerator is an extraordinary initiative based on public-private collaboration to convert international experiences into actions to boost the implementation of energy efficiency policies and programs in buildings. And of course, that is one of the main consumers of energy when we're talking about public buildings, schools, hospitals, even households. So what is the contribution of energy efficiency in buildings in mitigating climate change, Jennifer, and what progress has been made in this regard through the BEA? Thank you.
Thank you, and it's wonderful to be here with all of these esteemed panelists. Wonderful to see you all again. I am really struck coming back from the climate negotiations in the last 2 weeks at the level of engagement that we're seeing around the built environment. The recognition that we have for how we must decarbonize both the operations of buildings and the materials in buildings. This conversation has evolved dramatically over the last few years, including elements around how buildings can become prosumers, right? Producing energy as well as consuming energy. And those ideas around thinking through how you incorporate digital technologies into our most advanced buildings. But fundamentally, the Building Efficiency Accelerator was established, as you noted, to bring together policymakers at the city level and the private sector that is operating, managing, and constructing buildings in cities around the world to have a discussion and to define what an energy efficiency approach looks like in specific cities. So we have had over 65 cities now that have worked with us on this program, which has been running for about 5 years. And the goal has been to develop a policy, projects, and a tracking system. And I noted with great interest the development that we announced today around the Energy Hub, the observatory tool, and what this may be able to do in terms of providing data and information to all consumers. So buildings are about 40% of global energy. That includes the embodied energy in materials as well as the energy in energy consumption. We know that there is a very commercially available and ready set of technologies that can be used. But there are 3 things that hold us back. One, clearly we have to have the right policy signals in place around the construction, expectations for construction. That means setting procurement standards and carbon metrics. It means thinking about how we get upstream of the design of buildings so that we're not creating glass greenhouses that heat up on the inside when they need to be cooled and have better ventilation. That means looking at passive designs and climate appropriate building techniques. But it also means engaging the occupants and creating an incentive for green spaces, for reflective roofing, for thinking about where and how one uses technology in a building. And these are the kinds of things that the Building Efficiency Accelerator would do via our workshops with policymakers and with the technical partners that we worked with all around the world, including C40, ICLE, other organizations that have been very involved in city agenda in the ability to do that. And the reason to think about this now is that we have a huge build out of buildings around the world, and that 50% of more buildings will be built in this next 15 years. So we know that this is an opportune moment to think about the design and operation of those buildings, and they last for 50 years. Most buildings do. So we're locking in the carbon performance. I'll just say 2 more things because I know we're running short on time, but that is really around the need for us to build links between the energy efficiency agenda and the housing agenda, between the energy efficiency agenda and the industrial agenda, and between energy efficiency agenda and the energy supply. Because we know that these agendas appear to be siloed, and with different individuals having responsibility for budgeting, for operations, and budgeting for capital investments. Those kinds of connections is what the Building Efficiency Accelerator and its partners around the world were attempting to overcome by creating one very specific place-based dialogue on how to accelerate change. So it's with one more quick closing thought. And that is around all of the important roles that institutions play in bringing these activities together. So the Inter-American Development Bank, OLADE, the kind of institutional hubs where there's finance and technical expertise, we need to lean into this question of how do we connect the real experiences of people in buildings with the policy, investment, and climate priorities of our cities and our subnational governments and our national programming. So thank you very much for including me, and I look forward to the discussion.
Muchas gracias, Jennifer. Me parece muy relevante el tema.
Thank you, Jennifer. I think that holistic approach that you're mentioning is relevant at the sectorial level, at the level of focusing with renewable energies as well. We know that there are projects that are directly focused on distributed generation without necessarily taking into account the energy efficiency of installations first. And so I think this holistic approach is very relevant. Now let's move to Roberto. And I want to ask you, Roberto, from the 4E initiative, you are working in the promotion of energy efficiency in 5 products, and some of them have to do with something that Jennifer mentioned, which is elimination, refrigeration, and air conditioning, but also motors and distribution transformer. So in your opinion, Roberto, what are the key elements for energy efficiency to successfully help us decarbonize the region, and how can we support these efforts through the 4E? Thank you, Antonio. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you to OLADE and to the IDB for inviting me to join you today in this panel. As you were mentioning, in the U4E, we are working in 5 products. We are working in the elimination of air conditionings, refrigerators, motors, and distribution transformers. Now, pertaining to your question about the key elements, I would say that there are many key elements, but I would focus on some of them in particular. First of all, I think it's vital for us to work on regulations, on having ambitious legislation, and to have energetic labeling as well. For many of us, this might be obvious, but this is not obvious for everyone. Energy efficiency is one of the most cost-efficient measures out of all the measures that we can implement to fight and tackle climate change. With very few investments, we can actually very easily expand our efficiency, and we need to work with countries so that national budgets and national regulations include energy efficiency within their agendas. And I think that there is a possibility to continue working with many countries, because energy ministries and governments need to work in more ambitious energy efficiency measures. Also, we know that there are sort of mandates that prohibit the use of inefficient technologies, and having that kind of regulations is useful and has immediate effects, and this will definitely be useful for countries that have increased their electrical consumption. And many countries need to continue expanding their use of fossil fuels because they cannot have access to greener energy right now, such as the case of Brazil, because they're having droughts. It is also important for energy efficiency to go hand in hand with the implementation of renewables as well. There are countries that have taken many steps towards the use of renewables, but even if that's the case, they still consider the possibility of implementing regulations that go against our path. And the road ahead is very long. I was reading about a LED lamp the other day that is available and has an efficiency of 200 lumens per watt. And we are actually trying to implement regulations so that I can reach to 280 lumens per watt. So we have a lot of space to continue becoming ambitious in our progress to energy efficiency. We have been working with countries in surveying the 5 products that we're working on. We actually surveyed all 33 countries in the region, and what our surveys have shown is that if today we implemented ambitious measures for the 5 products that I mentioned, and these measures would be minimal, by the way, we would be achieving combined savings by 2030 of over 76 terawatts per year. And that actually tops the consumption of Colombia per year. So that's only doing minimal things, right? If we were to start implementing more ambitious measures by 2030, we can actually reach 59 terawatts per hour, which actually goes above the consumption of Peru last year. So if we were ambitious by 2030, we could reduce the consumption within the region as much as the current consumption in both Colombia and Peru. We also need to fight the fear that exists within decision makers against the implementation of ambitious measures, because sometimes they are afraid that the public opinion might go against them or that they might seem unpopular. So I think that it is important for policymakers and consumers to be informed on the fact that owning that equipment costs even more than just purchasing that equipment. We should explain the difference between what you have to pay for having an efficient and an inefficient equipment. We have something efficient that costs $300 and efficient equipment that lasts $600, but the benefits of buying that very efficient equipment is that you are saving about $6,000 in only a couple of years. And this kind of information needs to reach consumers so that they can make more informed decisions. We also need to provide more access to information and to have more information about the markets that we are entering into. Many times when we get to a country, the ministries of energy don't have that much information, or the information is not updated. So sometimes when we're doing market assessments, we need to determine that the market quota of efficient equipment is rather low. And more often than not, the conclusion is, well, the market is not ready for such efficient equipment. But in reality, what happens is that the products are inefficient because importers are bringing in the most affordable products because the customers are asking for them. We also need to work on monitoring and compliance, but of course that calls for more efforts from customs. And at U4E, we are trying to help countries and customs in order to start importing certified equipment. Another element to bear in mind is that countries could be divided into those that manufacture equipment and those that don't, those that import. For the manufacturing countries, it is also important for decision makers within those countries know that increasing energy efficiency should not be seen as a limitation, as something that hinders the national industry. It should be seen as a possibility for the national industry to become more competitive at the global level so that those nationally manufactured products be sold outside of the country. And I know that I'm going very fast, but the last element that I think is clear and is necessary for energy efficiency is the need to have regional collaboration. We see efforts, of course, from a couple of countries or groups of countries, especially in Central America, where efforts are duplicated and the knowledge is not actually leveraged. Resources are, of course, limited, so duplication is a problem. We do not necessarily need to innovate on something that has already been done. So we should try to have accredited regional laboratories, share costs together, and use resources more wisely.
It is also important to work at regional level in countries whose regulation goes behind. They can have more ambitious regulations. So these countries, do not transform into the final destination of those products that are not so efficient. There are countries that work together. So you know that borders can allow products to get in, products that are not that efficient and that can have negative impacts. Lastly, I believe it is important to look at to other regions, and we have several examples that I think we need to pay attention from Latin America and the Caribbean and try to replicate some of these experiences. Just to mention some, the case of SADC in the southern part of Africa and the eastern part of Africa countries, where 21 countries got together to work together to harmonize standards, or countries in the Southeast Asia. So just to conclude my presentation, I would like to invite all the other cooperation agencies, several bodies at international level, and of course the countries, so that we can work together to try to reach that harmonization that is so necessary for our region. Thank you very much, Roberto. What you said was very relevant, and I think that most people here would agree that the basic elements to promote energy efficiency is to have efficient devices and efficient equipment. I believe that is a huge challenge. So let me tell you that at the bank, we carried out a study of the progress for the performance of the different countries in Latin America, and also the progress made in the legislative arena, also going through policies and programs, and also the relevance of energy efficiency. And we saw that the region is behind 30%. Some countries are above 80%, but most of them are behind when it comes to standardization. And I think that we need to have efficient devices, and also that people have access to these devices, so that we are using new equipment, and also to replace the old ones that are not as efficient. And within that context, that global and regional context, I would ask Victor Hugo, is one of the main challenges that we face, as Roberto mentioned, is the lack of information to promote energy efficiency. So being able to define these policies, ICLAC developed a regional program that is indicator of energy efficiency. These activities are shown on the reports that I constantly read, of these reports of monitoring of energy efficiency. And I know that they have been published for 12 different countries. So based on the result of these reports and other studies by ICLAC, which is the expected progress made regarding energy efficiency in Latin America in the future, and which would be the impact of decarbonization in our region? Thank you very much, Jose Antonio. Thanks for the invitation. I would like to thank OLADE, and it's a pleasure to share a panel with these very special friends that work with energy and energy efficiency. As you mentioned, Jose Antonio, I believe it is important to remember that it hasn't been easy to raise awareness about the importance of energy efficiency. In a way, energy, when we talk about energy, is offer the one that controls the market. So I think that all fridges that are not so efficient broke down, and now people are paying attention to the fact of the importance of energy efficiency so that we can promote the measures that are cost effective to try to get the best energy services and also to reduce the impact of these devices. At ICLAC, they conducted several exchanges with the ministries in the region or the representatives of the main agencies, energy agencies in Latin America and the Caribbean, and they also included representatives for the governments and lawmakers. So they promoted the need to promote regulatory frameworks for energy efficiency and also the need to try to have an information system that included the final uses of energy. And that could be the foundation to the assessment of policies and programs of energy efficiency. That is how we created the BIA program. This was based on the European experience, the European model, OIC project, and that was carried out with the help of the French Agency for Development. They developed these projects of BIA indicators some 10 years ago, and as our friend mentioned, Borja Bad, this started with the Southern Cone, and then with the Andean countries, and then they ended up working with Mesoamerica and the Caribbean. They included Mexico, Central America, Dominican Republic, and Cuba. Basically, they provided training, and they transfer knowledge of this platform that is very important about this efficiency indicator system that allows us to have a sectorial vision of energy consumption, taking into account the main sectors. Of course, that each sector described their specific needs. So all these measures were very effective and could be implemented for energy efficiency projects. And that was thanks to those first assessments where they found indicators. And these monitoring reports were created. Also, there were different levels of progress by the different countries, but there was a general trend that was very positive. And we can say that after the BIA program, all countries now have specialized teams that work with energy efficiency. In some cases, they created departments or divisions working on this. The most advanced countries even passed laws and decrees related to energy efficiency. So there are specialized teams working on this topic with special budgets related to energy efficiency, and especially to monitor this topic. Then more than a project should be a global process, a continuum, so that we continue making progress in the future. And it is these aspects. So we should be aware of the benefits of energy efficiency. So it's important, and they require some time of maturation. The benefits are fundamental. So the great first step forward would be the creation of these special departments working on energy efficiency. The second step forward was the legal framework that were approved in some countries. The third step forward were all these working groups, for instance, audits in the government that was implemented by almost all the countries, and there are other cases in which the industrial sectors are working on energy efficiency. Also, the transportation sector has been included in all this process. And something else that is important is to see the work with the local governments, with the municipal authorities or provinces that also play a fundamental role in all this. Also, regional centers that have been very important. ICLAC contributed to this all, of course, with other bodies. UNIDO, for instance, was fundamental to the creation of an energy efficiency center for the Central American countries. There's another center that works in the Caribbean, and they effectively dealt with topics related to the synergy between small countries so that they can work together and share costs for the promotion and monitoring of energy efficiency. And something that is very important is the constant cooperation, and also from this office in Mexico and with the support of Mexican bodies, especially the CONUE. We work based on that experience, and we transfer knowledge about the technology for energy efficiency. For the first time now, countries have implemented their plans for energy efficiency and sharing a model. And the Mexican experience was also very important for regional standards. Several standards were approved when it comes to lighting and air conditioning in different countries in Central America and the Caribbean. And also they are analyzing some other standards and regulations. And also regulations in the transportation sector. This is a challenge that we need to consider in the area of regulations. Of course, that all these countries, they have their differences. And there are specific features to all and the different sectors, industries, in which energy efficiency plays a very important role, and there are huge opportunities. In some cases, there are dozens of projects related to energy efficiency, and they are looking for funding resources in order to promote them. And the most important of it all is to use this BS system together with a monitoring system to measure the progress of SDGs number 7, especially when it comes to energy efficiency. Also, we have promoted and used BA as a way of creating the baseline from which we can assess the national contributions in energy efficiency. And the great challenge ahead is the increase of emissions. I believe that is the task that we need to start. We can say that several countries in Latin America, 3 countries in SICA, led this first generation of energy agreements. And they mentioned this in the United Nations in September. So there's a lot to do. So we have just started working, but the benefits are very clear to all. Thank you. Thank you very much, Victor Hugo. I agree with your comments. I think that energy efficiency is part of our process. We need to monitor how it evolves. So this cannot be isolated actions, but systemic actions as part of the process that is permanently improving. As you mentioned, the relevance of this National Committee for the Use of Energy in Mexico that has been a champion in the region in this topic. And I would like to congratulate the agency on the 32 32nd anniversary.
And of course, this creates a working system for the organization. So basically, the question is, how do we measure when we're talking about a renewables project that is very much welcomed? Because when we talk about energy efficiency, there are uncertainties. So how is this measured and what results have been achieved in the fight against climate change from the results achieved in energy efficiency? Thank you, Jose Antonio, and hi to all the panel members. I will try to go quickly and be brief. I think this is a very relevant question. We do not evaluate the mitigation of greenhouse gas emissions. We try to assess how much energy has been saved, and we work with the National Ecology and Climate Change Institute in order to take those figures and convert them into avoided greenhouse emissions. For us, this assessment is important and measurements is very important. Something that I learned many years ago is that, for example, in Canada, there's an annual report that the first thing that it says is how much how many costs were saved. So the added value for us is what is the sociable profitability of an institutional effort such as the one that the CNUI does. And there are many ways to measure something. We can measure the output of a photovoltaic cell, but we cannot measure the savings. That the savings obviously are measured in other ways, as shown in the National Energy Efficiency Monitor that we worked on together with Victor Hugo, together with the German and the French cooperation. We actually managed to produce a report that assesses the years where the energy efficiency activity in Mexico has been very intense, as from 1995 all the way up to 2015. And this particular assessment that reviews the assessment of energy activity efficiency that goes all the way from the mining site all the way to a lamp in a household was very thorough. It brought together academia and researchers, and this particular survey showed us globally that there are two sectors that have significantly reduced their energy consumption. We have the industry sector by about 16% in that period that I mentioned. And of course, this is due to many things. In this particular case, I wouldn't be able to say that this is due to the actions of the government and of the stakeholders that want to achieve energy efficiency. But in the residential sector, where there are many official standards in Mexico, the reduction in the energy intensity comprised 45% in that particular time frame. In Mexico, we know that we have more and more people using energy, and we have been working in Mexico for about 20 years in this, and we see a continuous conversion into cleaner options. And this is a third-party assessment that has an internationally approved methodology, and it shows that Mexico is successful in these savings. We also carry out other program activities, for example, the case of the costs for the main buildings, and we can see the evolution of the costs in the energy consumption in buildings. But of course, these are measures. We also have another program for public lighting, and we also get the numbers there. And something that has happened in Mexico is that the consumption of the applicable rate for public lights has been reduced by 25% in 5 years. And that is because we are using LED technology, partially because we have official laws for that kind of technology in Mexico, but also because we are undergoing an unavoidable technological transformation. And basically what we have been doing is trying to control that change. We are also checking the historical measures for energy consumption in the case of LP and natural gas and for fuels used to heat water. And it turns out to be that historically in Mexico, consumption was on the rise by 6% in the residential sector, but as from that 1995, that consumption has been on decreasing. And the other data that is significant that comes from the Federal Electricity Commission. And data shows that a household in a warm area of Mexico nowadays consumes on average the same thing that we were consuming 5 years prior to getting these regulations. So we have a clear evidence of the impact that energy efficiency programs and energy efficiency activities are having in Mexico. And what matters the most is that the data is being presented by third parties, because I think that this really goes to the heart of credibility. And we also feel responsible in the region because, in as much as we are able to show that the budget that we are using in Mexico to have an institution that is fully devoted to energy efficiency has a clear return on investment at the social level, we are doing something relative for the entire continent. So thank you, Jose Antonio. Thank you to the IDB, and thank you, Olade, for giving me a room to explain this to you. Thank you. Thank you, Olun. Your points are very relevant, especially with regards to having a third party working together with CONUE. As a matter of fact, we are working on a platform that provides information on energy efficiency in buildings, and as part of the program for loans on energy efficiency in public buildings that we are about to launch in Mexico, we are including the development of a monitoring measurement system for the consumption and for the saving in buildings. I think that more and more the digitalization needs to become a fundamental element to support our energy efficiency actions. And it is worth noting that both the system as well as the platform do enable us to calculate how much we are mitigating in terms of emissions. Now, going back to the relevance of having a legal framework to achieve systematic actions, we see that many countries have energy efficiency programs, but they are isolated because no laws or regulations actually call for their updating. So it is a joy to have Gabriel Prudencia here with us today, because pursuant to what was established in the energy efficiency law enacted this year, by 2013, the country of Chile seeks to achieve an energy intensity reduction of 10%. And if we consider that that reduction is not something that is happening across the region, this would call for a cumulative saving of $15.2 billion and a reduction of 28.6 million tons of CO2. That is a very clear, robust goal established in the energy efficiency law of Chile. So based on that, Gabriel, what are the main actions established in the National Energy Efficiency Plan to achieve the reduction of energy intensity and GHG mitigation expected? Thank you, Jose Antonio, for inviting me to this panel. Thank you to all the participants who are joining us today as well. It is very interesting to hear about all the work that you are doing. Just to provide a bit of context to energy efficiency in Chile, and going along the lines of what Jennifer mentioned pertaining to climate change, I think the science is very clear about the pressing need for actions that might decrease the effects of climate change across the world. And in Chile, we have undertaken the commitment of becoming carbon neutral by 2050. This is not just an announcement, but this is part of our long-term energy efficiency and climate efficiency strategy. And we have an action plan to achieve this. We have decided that energy will be the fundamental factor in order to become carbon neutral. So the sector will be paramount for this. We have 4 pillars to become carbon neutral. First, we want to move away from carbon centrals and we want to increase the use of renewables. So basically, we want to clean our energy mix. And that measure will catalyze 2 more axes. One is electromobility and how electromobility will allow us to decarbonize the transport sector. The other pillar is green hydrogen. We know that green hydrogen will be fundamental, not just in Chile, but also in many regions of the world, going beyond the uses in the energy sector. And we could go on for hours and hours about that. And the 4th main pillar, and that's the one that we believe will mostly contribute to the reduction of emissions, is energy efficiency. We think 35% of the reduction of emissions will come from energy efficiency measures. And that is why in the past 10 to 15 years, we have been moving along many lines, standards, and labelings. We have been trying to improve in many aspects of energy efficiency, but the energy efficiency law, I think, in a way, consolidates most of the work that we have been doing and creates an essential framework to consolidate our actions. The law has 4 main axes. First, we are trying to institutionalize energy efficiency, and we will achieve this by implementing national energy efficiency plans. And as a matter of fact, I don't remember if it was yesterday or the day before that, we sent out for public consultations the first energy efficiency plan. So we drafted a document in collaboration with over 1,000 people from civil society that joined the process because we wanted this plan to show the vision of all the different stakeholders of society. We will send this out to public consultation for the next 3 weeks, and I will actually share this document with you in the chat. The energy efficiency established of the first plan should have as a mission 10% of reduction of energy by 2030. But in our plan, we're being even more ambitious. We say that we need to achieve a 15% of reduction of energy intensity by 2030. And by 2050, I don't recall the percentage, but it was also very ambitious. I'm sorry, I can't find the figure, but it was a significant reduction. I'm sorry, it was 35% by 2050. Really, without a shadow of a doubt, our goals are ambitious. We have been creating these models based on our plan in order to show that this would be feasible if we properly implement our measures. This is, of course, cost efficient, and also it is necessary because if we don't implement these measures, we will hardly reach carbon neutrality. So there is a pressing need to properly carry out the measures established in the plan. And going back to your question, and as a summary, there are some things that are in the law and some things that are in the plan. But in short, I want to share one action. And I would say that the big energy consumers that represent about 40% of the energy consumptions, what we will say is that for all those that consume above the threshold that are 30 terawatts a year, they need to implement energy management systems. And the observatory has shown the benefits of having these systems, and it is proven that by implementing these systems, we can significantly reduce energy consumption among the main consumers. We do not have a specific goal for the reduction per company, it is very hard to define this per company because the gaps and the opportunities are different depending on the sector and depending on the company, depending on how long they have been implementing energy efficiency actions. So what we want is for each company and each sector to find opportunities. So that would be a summary of consumers.
I think there are two main areas. That one is the updating of the energy efficiency standards, or um, we have a standard that is in force. It's been in force for 10 years, but we need to make a quality change to get better levels of insulation for households. That will be complemented with a measure of labeling of all new buildings, not only households, but all of them the same as we have a label on fridges, for instance, that show the category A plus, B, C, D. That will be used for buildings. So to provide better information when, for instance, moving into a house or a building, not only about the basic services provided, but also about the cost of electric maintenance in general. When it comes to transportation, a very important measure implemented is the standards for energy efficiency in the transportation sector. These already exist in most developed countries, but it does not in emerging countries, and we need to promote that so we become more ambitious in this respect, so that we import vehicles that are more efficient. We know that some manufacturers manufacture different vehicles, just that the most efficient ones are sold in the States or Europe. So we need to demand a change on that so that our markets receive vehicles that are efficient when it comes to the vehicle fleet. And we are doing that through this law and this plan that is complemented with an electromobility strategy that will allow us to combine the different strategies to reach higher efficiency. We know electromobility is a very important step, that by 2035 we're going to be selling cars that are non-pollutant, and we are pretty proud of that, and it's an ambition similar to those developed countries. So that could be an overview of the several actions that are being implemented and what it means to be energy efficient. That should be possible for all the companies. It has benefits for the companies and the country. So we need to be intelligent when deciding these strategies and how to accelerate all these measures of energy efficiency. Thank you very much, Gabriel. Your presentation was very clear. And thanks for your efforts to being able to summarize all these sections. I think that the transportation sector is very relevant in this panel, and it's one of the sectors where we have a concentration of consumption. So it's important to include efficiency and electromobility. Now, Omar, I think that the aim of all these panels should be exactly this: how to combine and coordinate these networks, being able to coordinate efforts by all the stakeholders, that sometimes for different reasons we cannot make progress faster. So I would like to get to know your opinion and your experience in this knowledge network in Colombia for energy efficiency, and something that is very important, which is the role to be played by the academia in the promotion of energy efficiency. Your mic is off. Thank you for having me. Greetings to you all. It's a very sunny day in Bogota. It's kind of cold, but it's very sunny. Yeah, thank you for your question. One of the experiences that we had in Colombia is the consolidation of a Colombian network of energy efficiency. That network was created after an invitation and an initiative by the bodies in the country. I was director of energy efficiency program, and we believed, we had the idea of creating this kind of network that is fundamental for energy efficiency. As it happens in all the countries, the academia, the experts, and the research, they are all working isolated, and that happens everywhere. So in many cases, knowledge is not shared as a public asset, let's say, because sometimes works do not work together, they do not share information. So, and that has to do with publication of scientific papers and how important this is to researchers. Within that context, we had this Colombian network of energy efficiency right before the Colombian government passes the first law in 2001 that focuses on the rational use of energy. That was the concept that they were dealing with at the moment. So then energy efficiency became public policy. So the rational and efficient use of energy is something positive for the country. So the government committed to promoting the rational use of energy and non-conventional sources of energy, as they said in 2001. With that statement, they define a program for the rational and efficient use of energy. And this states different criteria for energy saving and also potentials for renewable resources. Colombia, as someone said on a newspaper, his father was a doctor and he was a very important writer. This journalist said that Colombia is in the green corner of the world. We have very, very interesting conditions when it comes to water, biomass, geothermal, different heights for PCH. We have the wind with the very constant speeds in Alta Guajira. There's a lot of wind energy in that region, one of the highest rates in the world by square kilometer, and also solar energy. We have very good radiation throughout the year. So with these features, and then this 697 law defines this project that was developed 10 years after that. I was the director of the first national program where we defined strategies, action plans, policies, and potentials, and we set goals. So we had a very good design, but it was difficult to implement. We are very good at creating laws, but not so good at implementing them. We have public policies that are very good regarding energy efficiency, but it's difficult for us to enforce them. When we created the network consolidated the opportunity of sharing knowledge between the different universities and also to share that with the productive sector. So we started working with researchers, with government researchers. We started developing training programs in energy efficiency and energy management in the industry in Colombia, and that was very interesting. We have a congress that takes place every 2 years. We have included, and we have invited Odon, I remember, he attended one in Cartagena, and that has generated a platform, a knowledge platform. That is what we need in our countries, a knowledge platform, not only for research in interesting topics, such as the use of energy, but the useful use of energy. Colombia now is in a useful energy balance, and that is very important because we define the real potentials as a country of energy balance. That is new, and we have worked with different universities to gather information. And we gathered that information thanks to the national programs of energy efficiency with the national universities. These are 18 universities working together, and also different bodies as trade chambers that have some components dealing with energy, other associations that are now part of the network. And that network is constantly generating information, guidelines, and also courses for industry. So creating all the capacities, that is very important. What we need to do is, well, the network was officially created. I'm the director of that network, and we want to promote the technological capacity and the ability to develop technology in our countries. In the case of Colombia, this is very important. Why? Because one of the aspects that is key for this, in this transition, is that we need to create the capacities at technology development. We're going to have trouble and problems with laboratories, for instance, laboratories to verify and check all the technology that is arriving into the country that should be efficient, and also the technology that has to do with renewable energies, solar panels, windmills, even if they come from Europe. We need to check all the photovoltaic, for instance, solar systems that we're going to be using in Alta Guajira, where maintenance conditions are very hard. So we have decided to promote technology development laboratories and to have prototypes, so to check how to adapt those things to our reality. An issue that is important, I think, is how to measure. If to have a transition in industries needs to measure all these processes. To set the energy performance indicators, they need to have processes in the technologies, and they need to measure all these so that they can monitor all the different indicators. We have implemented so far 200 different programs or energy management systems with the support of United Nations and UNIDO. So we have management systems, but it's not that easy to measure all this, because that involves changing their operations to have technicians and experts in the process of measuring, and that's difficult and hard to implement. That is a challenge, and I think that for the transition that we want to implement, we need that capacity to develop technology. We need laboratories, prototypes, measuring systems. If, of course, we're talking about smart measuring, and we're also good. Again, we are very good at implementing, creating law, but not as good as implementing them. We need to increase innovation and technological development. We are promoting innovation solutions, the right solutions for small and medium-sized enterprises. Our productive system in Colombia is concentrated in a small area, but there are a lot of SMEs in the country that have little possibilities to implement management systems. So, you know, a manager has several roles within the company. How to implement management systems in an SME. So we believe we could do that together with universities and research projects, or through master's degrees thesis or PhD thesis that will be adapted to our needs. And in that sense, I think that we have made progress. Law 1615 of 2014 now gives an opportunity to include this project of research, acknowledges the importance of this network, especially knowledge networks, in order to create and build that foundation that we need. After the energy transition of 2014, there's a new law this year that has to do with green hydrogen, with tax exemption benefits. I'm right now at a hotel finishing a course for a multinational company. I think it's called AES Colombia. I think it's also popular in Chile. And with several universities, we implemented a course for hydrogen. Of course, we have physicists that work with electrolysis and energy mechanisms for hydrogen, but we also have economy experts, doctors in economy that are finding out about business models in hydrogen. And we are providing training courses for the big players. So they don't have time for a complete analysis. What we do here is we provide courses so we can discuss technology aspects, business models that can be adapted to Colombia in the hydrogen issue.
And we also discuss how we can adapt those policies. And those are the multiple areas that we have been working on in the network. We had a website. The website stopped working during the pandemic. So I'm afraid I cannot share it with you right now because we are in the process of reactivating the site. And over there, we work on perspective and technological vigilance and monitoring processes so that industrial, commercial, and residential users can get information. And we do this monitoring exercise to be up to date with the different technologies arising across the world. And at the perspective level, we are working to plan for the long term for 2030 and 2050 by scenarios. And based on that, we created an energy observatory. And this observatory was created by law. The Council of Ministers actually decided to establish the creation of an energy observatory within the framework of green growth in Colombia. The observatory was then created, and I was able to participate in this discussion. The observatory has been created already, and its mission and vision is to monitor the transition in a very similar way as the hub does. And what we're trying is we're trying to monitor indicators, and we're trying to generate as much information as possible in order for the different stakeholders in the market to make decisions. We're trying to make permanent monitoring. We are trying to share indicators to provide information for decisions made by policymakers, but also for market decisions as well. We know that the market requires information. We are entering a stage where, of course, end users are actively participating within the national energy framework. And of course, we need to discuss the efficient management of demand. And within our last decree, we are establishing the efficient management of demand. And doing this implies, of course, having measurements and managing a change within the energy demand of the country. The energy balance in Colombia, the mix is very interesting. We have a strong hydraulic mix. The hydroelectric mix is significant in the country. We are also including biomass, of course. And we are also trying to use carbon in thermal electrical plants and gas. But of course, that is marginal within the mix. In our thermal electrical mix, we are using carbon and gas. And of course, as the Chilean experts were mentioning, this will leave the market, of course, because we know that they need to transition into other opportunities. Nevertheless, 99% of carbon from Colombia is being exported, and we are exporting this to Europe. We're exporting this to Asia. They have been buying our products, and we are clean, but we are exporting all of our carbon, and that will be complicated for us because part of our economy relies on the exportation of carbon and petrol. And of course, we are facing a challenge because we're very clean. We use water, we use the sun, we use the wind, we use biomass, but we are exporting oil and carbon to the world. Yes, that is a very interesting subject for sure, because emissions need to be measured in different ways, not just in the way that we consume internally, but also externally. I'm sorry, I'm being asked to wrap up. We went over time, but thank you still for your comments. Without further ado, I want to thank Jennifer, Roberto, Victor Hugo, Gabriel for this panel. Thank you, Omar, and really thank you for participating. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you. Thank you. I want to thank all the members of the panel who participated in this session. Please stay tuned to see the progress for energy efficiency. For this presentation, we will have Andrea Haynes, who is a consultant for the Pulse event. Good afternoon again. I will now tell you about a consultancy service that we did within the framework of the Pulse project. Allow me to share my presentation. This work was conducted to create a program for energy administrators in public institutions, both in Panama and in Dominican Republic. I will go very quickly through this. The objective of this consultancy service was twofold for both countries. On the one hand, we were focusing on the development of a proposal and a program of energy administrators for the Republic of Panama based on what was in force at that time, and also in Dominican Republic, leveraging the experience from Panama. The second component had to do with the development of energy efficiency guides that would provide tools to these energy administrators that would become a part of these programs. In order to structure this particular program, the approach was to work on 5 dimensions. First of all, we were working with the identification of how the countries were organized, what were the institutional arrangements enforced, what were the possible improvements that could be proposed. Then we analyzed the regulations that had been developed already and how much those regulations met the requirements of this global energy efficiency in public institutions plan were being satisfied, the use of information about how energy was being consumed in public agencies. We basically wanted to understand what data was available and the kind of equipment that was being used. Another pillar had to do with the financial and economic incentives were available for public agencies in order to implement energy efficiency measures. And last but not least, the strengthening and the training of capacities. We were focusing on these 5 pillars, and based on that, we analyzed the existing program in the Republic of Panama, and we proposed an improvement for what was already in place in order to strengthen and extend its implementation. So working on these pillars, we started working with institutional organizations. This exists by law in energy committees. We have energy committees. We have the energy administrator as well within Panama. But in a way, we analyzed how we could strengthen these agencies, this committee, and how it was possible for them to report within their organizations. Because what happens sometimes is that the challenge for those who have to lead an energy committee is that they are part of an organization that is mainly focused on something that has nothing to do with energy. Perhaps they have something to do with health, education, administration. They have other primary objectives. And so it's important to create a committee for each organization to be able to carry out these tasks. Within the program, we also organized based on the size of the different institutions, how we could include coordinators and people responsible for installing these systems, because sometimes the organizations were too big, and so we needed to have someone responsible for those activities. Within this framework, we also define indicators to monitor the program, goals and objectives for the program connected to those indicators. And we also provided mechanisms to monitor and assess the program. And as we saw in the previous panel, this was fundamental in order to measure the impact of the different programs and the different energy efficiency measures. Pertaining to information, we included within the energy efficiency plan carried out by the institutions within Panama, the Energy Development and Performance Report. For this, we provided a guide for the implementation of this plan. Part of that information has to do with developing an annual plan that has defined characteristics. They need to be comparable. We need to be able to monitor them as it always happens with an action plan. Then we move forward with electrical billing and invoicing. We find this in many countries of the region. Many times those that consume the energy are not the same people that are paying for it, or the same that are getting billing information. So sometimes something that should be very easy is not easy at all. Many times this creates a roadblock, and it is complicated for us. So within the program analysis, we started discussing how we could speed this process up and improve billing in order to use this as a monitoring tool. We also establish an annual schedule to provide reports for this information. And what we proposed was implementing this in a web platform so that we could monitor consumption as well as energy efficiency reports. In the case of incentives, I think the biggest challenge in the public sector, and this happens, I think, in most countries in the region, and what happens is that conditions are not defined within the regulation or within the different legislations for the savings of those public agencies to remain within those agencies and then to be used by those agencies for energy efficiency investments. This is a big challenge, and this is something that should be obvious, because sometimes when we are analyzing energy efficiency, what we see is that the repayments are reasonable. These could be reasonable repayments of 3, 4, 5 years. But when we reach the public sector, we come across this double roadblock. We cannot actually account for these savings. We do not have pluriannual budget, so it is very hard for us to commit when we really don't know what will happen in the years to come. And this thing that should be easily implemented, and this thing that the state should be interested in, becomes so much harder to do within the public sector. So what we proposed within this program was for funds within the annual budgets to be used for a fund that might be used for the investment in energy efficiency. And we also wanted to be able to identify energy efficiency investment projects so that they might be introduced in a timely manner to funding programs and plans and agencies that might provide us with loans and reimbursable investments, but we do need to have a project portfolio clearly identified so that once there is a window of opportunity or a call for projects, we have everything set up to present that information. And last but not least, as a more symbolic incentive, we wanted to open a specific category for the public sector in the award for the rational and efficient use of energy that we have in Panama. Now, in terms of capacity building, we wanted to develop a specific plan for all the stakeholders of the program based on their roles and based on their functions. And regarding regulations, we wanted to include recommendations, for example, for public procurement to incorporate parameters of energy consumption in the useful life for equipment that consume energy within the Panama procurements. And that's a platform in Panama where the government states guidelines for procurements within the public sector. And this is a very useful tool where certain parameters can be defined for equipment being purchased by the public sector. And within the public procurement guidelines, there were standards that were implemented for minimum energy performance standards, and that's really good. And it's useful to have them for multiple equipment use within the government. We wanted to start by the public sector because I think it's easy to set up a minimal standard for public purchases. Last but not least, we wanted to include the possibility of entering into agreements by energy performance. We wanted to follow the ESCO model. We do have some exceptions. Chile has good experiences, Uruguay also, but in general, what happens with this model is that we might think that it is beneficial because it's an investment made by ESCO, but because of one reason or another and because of a lack of proper regulations, what happens is that the public sector is limited to include an ESCO as possible beneficiaries for funds. So we want to establish within the regulation the ESCO model as a way for procurement between private companies and the public sector. And there is the FUREE fund. And in this case, an alternative that we found is for ESCOs to be able to apply to this FUREE so that then money can be covered through savings. So what we proposed here were different instruments and different alternatives to try to overcome the obstacles that we had found for energy efficiency in the public sector. I will not go into detail here. This is just to give you an outlook of what the roadmap was. We propose okay, let me show you. Give me a second. What we proposed for the for year number 1, year number 2, year number 3 are different things that we could implement. Things that required more analysis, further discussion, and what would take longer. We included organization, monitoring, and assessment, the conduction of reports, and the funding tools, training, and information and public procurement. And this is color coded. Everything that is blue falls under the responsibility of the National Energy Secretariat. Anything that is purple includes the public agencies that participate in the programs that would have to be a part of the energy committees and provide the energy efficiency plans. In red, we have the National Secretariat and all participating agencies. In orange, we have other public agencies together with the National Energy Secretariat. And then in green, we have the Energy Secretariat and third parties. And these third parties, for example, intervene. Also, we have over here the tender of projects through the ESCO model. And we try to identify all of this information. And what we wanted simply was to see which pillar we were working on. We also wanted to explain how feasible it would be to implement this in 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, or 4 years. And as you know, even if we're talking about the public sector in general, what often happens is that different stakeholders within the public sector start coming up that require for articulation, and we need to bring them on board. Energy efficiency. So there is a clear, interesting challenge for us here. Of course, this program and this consultancy was conducted thanks to Marta Bernal and to her team. We worked in this back and forth that really produced a product that might be useful and concretely implemented. And as a part of the consultancy services that we were providing, we also created guides for energy efficiency. We created material so that energy administrators might implement these measures. The first guideline had an introduction to energy efficiency with general concepts, building concepts, benefits of energy efficiency. I mean basic things. Then a second guide and instructions and recommendations as to how to create an energy performance report. Guides 3, 4, and 5 propose concrete energy efficiency measures with different outlooks for administrative buildings, for hospitals, for schools, and for sporting spaces. Many of the points are the same because we have refrigeration and heating, but of course, depending on the final use of that public building, we will be implementing different measures, perhaps in the first place, in the second place, and in the third place. So, for example, heating and refrigerating a school and cooling a school is not the same as doing that with a hospital that is operating 24/7. So these guidelines, in a way, try to summarize recommendations based on the specificities of each type of building. This does not only focus on projects, but also identifies and provides tools for energy administrators and managers so they can find measures to improve the operation of public buildings. And the manager can also find room for opportunities in technology changes. And I want to emphasize this because many times we think about energy efficiency and we think about technological renewal and investment projects, which are absolutely important, but there is also room for opportunity that we have not yet capitalized on to improve operations and improve maintenance. I think that that is where energy management systems most definitely start making more and more sense and bring in value. As a matter of fact, a lot of the analysis and the proposals created within the context of this program, many of the recommendations here and the guidelines did take into account the framework proposed by an energy management system. We see over here more in detail the content of these guides, the benefits of the energy efficiency, the existent regulations. All of this is information that might be available at the public level, but that actually looks to provide a very handy introductory guide for energy managers that have as much information as possible for his or her everyday work. This also includes a guide to carry out the energy performance report, and then guides depending on the type of building that is being operated. And in short, each manager will use 3 out of these 6 guides, the introductory one, the report one, and the one specific to his or her sector. Of course, we try to generalize things for each sector, but then we can adapt them if this is a big hospital or a small hospital, the kind of installations of a school. But of course, we try to create standardized recommendations that would apply to as many installations as possible. Finally, as an additional deliverable, we actually shared an Excel sheet that is easy to use and that is useful for the decision-making process. It helps calculate and things. It helps us identify uses and consumption of energy, identify significant uses of energy. It helps us prioritize windows of opportunity. So I have to deal with 250 pieces of equipment. Okay, how do I do that? So this helps us organize the uses and consumptions of energy, prioritize them, see how they are distributed across the installation, what is their final use. And based on all of that, we can identify and prioritize rooms for opportunity, and of course, define energy performance indicators to then later on monitor that plan necessary in the program. This is a very general overview because I know that we have gone over time. Hopefully, this will be useful for Panama, for Dominican Republic, countries with which we work, in which I thank for their cooperation and collaboration. I also want to thank the Vice Ministry of Energy Savings and Efficiency. Having said that, I am available if we have any questions. Thank you to the project consultant, Andrea Hines, and all of you who were with us today on the second day of our Energy Week. We want to thank you for joining us through our live stream and YouTube, and thank you to our media partners as well. We also want to take this opportunity to invite you to our third panel on interagency dialogues to be conducted tomorrow at 9 a.m. Quito time. Thank you very much. See you tomorrow. Good afternoon. Thank you.